What's up? This is Ace Enders from the early November, and you are listening to the Voice and Verse podcast.
Hello there, and welcome to episode 17 of the Voice and Verse podcast. 17, we're really getting up there. I'm your host, Evan Lucy, taking you through the stories behind your favorite songs. This week, I am joined by Mr. Ace Enders, best known as the frontman and chief songwriter of the band The Early November. The Early November formed back in 1999 in Hammond, New Jersey, and would go on to be one of the linchpins of the Drive Thru Records scene, releasing seminal albums like The Room's Too Cold and The Mother, The Mechanic, and The Path. After a 5-year hiatus, the band got back together and released 2012's In Currents, their first album for new label Rise Records. Outside of The Early November, Ace is also an accomplished producer, and, as you'll hear in this interview, actually does a little bit of writing for pop artists as well. I caught up with Ace as The Early November was in the midst of an acoustic tour to talk about the band's career, how mixing art with business isn't always the best idea, and why he's probably going to have the best family band in all of New Jersey. Stick around to the end of the show for some news and notes, but until then, I hope you enjoyed this chat with Ace Enders from The Early November.
Life is an ocean and it moves like this, so you get what you ask for. In love with the current drifting from your hands, all you want, all you're after. Now in the middle of the night when I'm lying in peace.
And do you remember, go back, the very first song you ever wrote?
Okay. Yes, I got it.
What was it?
I was a sophomore, and well, you know what? I can't remember exactly what it was about, but I think it was 3 chords that were that didn't really make much sense. And the band I was in at the time was like, if you want to start writing songs, then we're not going to do it anymore. We don't want to play because you're not twisted enough like Eddie Vedder or Scott Weiland to actually have a future. So that band unfortunately broke up after I decided to write a song.
Wow.
But that's how it went. Yeah.
And then shortly after that, did The Early November start, or what was the timeline on all that?
Well, after that, I started a band with Joe, who is in The Early November now, and that unfortunately didn't work out. That band, as great as we were, who we were awesome. We were called Black Market Children. It didn't quite work out, but that's where we really started to dive into the whole songwriting process and like analyzing how people write songs and whatnot. And that was a really got all the wheels moving. Then I started a band called the June Spirit and wrote that's when I really started to just write a lot. And we recorded, and the producer at the time was like, told me to take a week off, and I took a week off, and in that time, he had the band find another singer, and they re-sang all the songs that I had written, and the band showed me like a week later, they're like, okay, so we did this, hope you're not mad, and, then I left that band, and then I started The Early November, directly after that.
Man, people really don't want you around, and they didn't want you around back in the beginning.
You're telling me, man. You're telling me.
But that's cool that you started analyzing songs. I think there's kind of 2 ways you can go with it when you're starting out. You can either just kind of fall into it and get pushed in the pool and figure it out for yourself, or you can try to take a more kind of academic approach and figure out the pieces, how they fit together. So what were some of the things that you studied, or like the songs that you analyzed?
Well, the thing for me is, like, I feel like I've always done a bit of both. Like, right now, just to skip ahead a little bit, like, what I do now is, like, I'm a producer and a songwriter at home. So, like, I'm constantly writing for other artists or with bands who are in the studio. And, like, I feel like I've always been able to play both sides of the field of, like, analyzing what's good right now, but also that free-flowing, just jump into it and let it happen. And I think like from the time I started, which now we'll go back to the, where we started this question. It's, I've always been able to like, I think, look at what was sort of happening in the world or in music, and then, keep that in the back of my mind, but allow it to be free with just whatever comes out naturally at that moment. I feel like I've always, I hold that at a higher level than anything, just like being in that specific moment and not trying to force something to fit a certain, whatever it has to be. So I think like back in the day when the Early November, or before the Early November, back when me and Joe were in our first band, like listening to like, Saves the Day album and like really like studying the lyrics, or like seeing, like learning how to become a writer and in that side of it. And musically, like I've always loved like, when I was that age, like my favorite bands were like Saves the Day, Jimmy Eat World, and Pearl Jam.
Sure.
So like I know that's like a weird like contrast, but I feel like I've always like studied the more or thought about the more like rock side of it mixed with the more sensitive side of it, and tried to just keep those things in the back of my mind. And now looking back at the past 14 or however many years that we've been releasing music, I can now just finally see the influences all sort of coming together. Like when I listen to older stuff that we have done, and it's kind of cool.
Well, yeah, especially since the lines, I think, have blurred so much that there are no more genres. It's just kind of all
right.
You can have a pop song that's got elements of disco or funk in it, and nobody really bats an eye because things are so different now. But what was the first song, maybe when you were starting out, maybe it was June Spirit or Early November, that you kind of were like, okay, like this is, I'm onto something here. Like maybe this is something I can do for real.
I think the song would be Sunday Drive, which was the first song that I went into the Early November with, that I wrote when I was in the June Spirit. And, we played it at a couple shows, and I just seeing how people reacted to that song really, sort of, I guess made me feel like maybe I actually can write songs, because people would be quiet and pay attention, which, if you go to shows, it's kind of hard to get people to do that, especially being younger. And I think that was the one that sort of always stood out to me as like, oh, like it seems like this can actually do something. And then still I say it every single night, but even on this tour, it's like that song gets yelled out so much, and it's like it's crazy that I wrote it at that point in my life. So it's a cool thing.
Sure, and it's cool that you're able to. You're on an acoustic tour right now for people who don't know the context of where you are, and then you also did. I think last year you did a couple shows commemorating the Room's Too Cold's 10-year anniversary. So,
right.
So when you go back and you look at those songs, do you think about, oh, I wish I could have done this differently?
I think I'll always do that, like with everything I write, but. It's that's the selfish point of it, part of it for me. But seeing how people still react to them, it's like I probably would never change anything about it, just because it's it definitely has a special place with the people who care about its heart. So I definitely will always probably have that on the back of my mind, like, oh, I wish I would have sang that better, or changed this line to whatever. But it's one of those things that I'm really happy that it is the way it is, and I was as weird as I was back then. So.
Well, you're also probably able to think about the great times that you had making those records. What do you remember about making The Room's Too Cold and writing those songs? Because that was like your first full length, and I think Drive Thru was really going through that cool thing at the time where all of the bands were blowing up, and Drive Thru was becoming more than just a label; it was like a way of life. I was a total Drive Thru kid back in the day, and I had the DVDs and basically everything that label put out, I was in on.
Right.
So being like swept up in that, did that kind of color the writing of the record, or did you have any more pressure, or did you have pressure just because it was the first full length?
I think at that point in my life, like, I really had no pressure. I didn't think about that stuff. I just wrote and did whatever felt was right. And especially with the record like The Room Too Cold, like, I mean, I didn't even let a computer touch the album. You know, I was just like, wanted to keep it real, wanted to keep it extremely raw, which was sort of anti what was happening in our scene at the moment, because it was like everybody was getting obsessed with the idea of auto-tune and being able to manipulate, you know, your songs. And I feel like the stance we had on it was the complete opposite of that, was like, you know, fight against that grain. And I think, you know, not that either is right or wrong, it's just I feel like at that moment, you know, the pressure was the last thing. I felt like I just needed to remain, you know, making something that sounded real and felt real and maybe a little too real, but, you know, it, yeah, there was definitely, it's just a different mindset. I think about it, it's just sort of crazy to put yourself back there of how I went into, well, not like it was wrong, but just the way of going into making a record at that point and going into it now versus it's so much more of a, you know, it has to be a business, unfortunately, or it has to be something that, you know, has to compete. Because back then no one cared about that stuff. It was just like, you're going to play shows, money wasn't even, I didn't even know it existed. So it was just like, you know, do whatever.
What do you remember about the actual, like, the writing of it? Was it a quick process, or did you kind of toil over the songs, or?
I think the majority of it was written like it was all written on an acoustic guitar, but by the time it actually developed was like maybe a week before we went into the studio, and like I had a bunch of stuff written that I thought was cool, and then, you know, as a band we probably played on it for a couple weeks just to, you know, mess with everything, and then you know, I had like some lyrics, but I mean, for that whole record, like I would just write lyrics the morning before I went to sing the song, which is pretty weird, but that's how it all worked out. And that's, I think, why it's as cohesive as it is, probably, of an album.
Well, yeah, you don't have the chance to overthink things either, right? You're just like,
right.
You just have a self-imposed time deadline of when you got to step in the booth, and it kind of forces you to come up with your best stuff and not just labor over it, which I think, given the luxury of being able to make records at home these days, a lot of bands do.
Right.
The kind of democratization of technology and the ability to record in your bedroom kind of tend to overthink
it's a double-edged
things.
sword, that's for sure.
Yeah. Is there a song that kind of started as something else but ended up as something completely different when the record finally came out?
On that record, I mean, I think there was probably a lot of them. I know that Sesame Smash for Me, one of the tracks off that album, started out, I remember when we started putting that song together, it was a little bit of a different feel. It was meant to be like a very clean pop song that we were going to like use as a single, you know, and it ended up being one of probably the looser sounding songs on the track that we were just like, you know, it's got a very carefree type of feel, and, you know, it was definitely not what I thought it was going to be, you know, I think in a good way, you know, but I think that album totally was just whatever happens type of an album.
Which is good, especially for your first full length. It's just kind of, and you can hear a new band just trying to find their own and trying to throw a bunch of stuff against the wall and hoping something sticks. Yeah. I think so. There's a line on Baby Blue. It's the line, you know, the line on Baby Blue. I don't want you to love me anymore.
Right.
Which is a reference to a Get Up Kids song. What's the story behind that? I know there was a little bit of drama that went down.
Yes, I've told this story several times. We didn't ever talk about it openly, I guess, until a few years ago. But you know, it was definitely, for us being kids and at the time, and very early 20s and teenagers, even some of us, like, you know, we loved nothing more than that band, the Get Up Kids, and so we wanted to give a little like tribute, and I guess they didn't take it like that, and one thing led to another, and we thought we had clearance to use it, and it turns out that after it had come out, somebody had got the information wrong, and they decided that we weren't allowed to. Whether it was them or the management, I have no idea, but there's some legal stuff and whatnot, and some junk, but we sort of just sat on that for a number of years, probably I guess at least like a decade, and then we finally ended up, I talked to Matt, and, we sort of cleared the air on everything. But, that was one of those lessons in the music business. For me, that was like one of my first ones, they were definitely heroes, and then to find out that you were getting in, legal trouble because of, sort of, I guess, letting them know publicly how much they meant to you. I don't know why. I don't, it's hard to really talk about, but it's just one of those weird things.
Yeah.
Well, it's just a very weird situation.
You did a couple shows on that Where's the Band tour. Was that the one with Matt and Conley? And
Yeah, we did a full tour. That was
full tour. Okay, cool.
I think that was like 3.5 weeks or something like that, or a month.
So things are good now.
Yeah, things are good now. Things are fine. We aired everything out. We had some good conversations, and I like to think that we're all really cool now.
Do you still do in light of that? Do you still kind of hide things here and there, or have you just kind of shied away from it given the first experience that you had?
You mean
will you borrow things from songs that you love in terms of lyrics?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Not even come close. I won't even. Once in a while, maybe if it's something like extremely special, but barely. I would say I haven't since, and I don't really think that I, at least consciously, will do that. So
I'm sure your lawyer is very happy about that.
Yeah.
You did something so radically different on the second record. Well, for one, it's 3 records, but
right.
What was I guess what was the impetus behind trying to do something so radically different?
I think I felt like everything that was happening, at least to me, during that time, I could be 100% wrong, and I probably was, but it felt like everything was becoming very much the same, and the same techniques were being used, the same types of bands were everywhere, and I think I just wanted to really try and do something that was like completely outside of the box, and that definitely would just, allow me to feel like I was writing something that wasn't just to get from A to B, but like actually writing something. And if anything comes across in that, I think that it's that. It's definitely not an album that takes you from one point in your career to the next, like makes your band, like the typical journey that a band would have. That was intended to be something artistic for me, and something that would be, a challenge, and either an awesome success or an awesome failure. And I think that's sort of where I was at with it. Not really. When I was younger and went into it, like I didn't always look at it as like, this is a business and you have to, make the right steps to keep going. It was more or less just doing or writing something for the purpose of writing, and not to just inflate the band or, at that moment. So I feel like with that album, like there's a ton of stuff, and some of it I look back and I have a hard time getting through. Like I feel like it's not what I intended, but some of it, in a way is, and is, for me, that was my big, that was as much weirdness and personality, I think, as you could put into an album that can happen. So, I really pushed all my limits at that point, like trying to, just make it as, I guess, all over the place as possible. And I think it sort of is. So I'd say halfway succeeded for sure.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's hyper ambitious. You've got 3 discs with a story that runs throughout them. You've got the dialogue parts mostly on the third
Right.
record of it, and it's. I don't think I've heard anything like it since. It's definitely one of those things that I think a lot. You have to be kind of either a masochist of a writer to attempt, or somebody who just it comes very easily to.
Right.
Was it easy to? I mean, so what came first? Did you come up with the story that you wanted to tell, or what was the kind of formation behind the idea?
The story first, and along the way, the story changed several times, but the story was the first root of everything, and I based everything around that, and it was intended to, song-wise, go along like the other 2 albums to complement the dialogue album as far as story goes, and in song order as well. And I mean, like I said, it changed a couple times. The dialogue album, like I have, at least like 4 or 5 versions of it that, are all a little bit different. I mean, we have one version that was completely done, that was all actors and like just a bunch of people, and it was cool, but it came off a little too theater and not enough, music, or not enough, I guess, like emotion or whatever. But we had a few different versions of it, and I definitely, for that album, went a little bit nuts for sure. But I definitely spent a lot of time mulling everything over and trying to get everything to fit. With storyboard, all sorts of stuff. Just like I mean, my workspace for that was pretty insane looking. So, yeah.
Wikipedia, the always reliable Wikipedia, says that the third disc, which is called The Path, was turned down 7 times by Drive Thru. Is that correct?
No, but hey, whoever put that there at least believed that happened. It was turned down, I think, by myself and just everybody feeling like it wasn't there yet, and just being, trying to get the right product. But like I said, I had a bunch of different versions, and the first version we definitely turned down. The label didn't turn down, but they said, I think you need to just keep working on this and use some of it, but take the initial, the original idea that I had and build more off that and not more of the theater type feel. So that was the only time that they ever said, I think this could use a little bit more work. It wasn't like we sent a bunch and they just kept saying no. But,
I'll have to go on here and correct this. I've been doing some Wikipedia correcting in light of doing these things.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, I think that raises another interesting point. It's like, songwriting is a very personal thing, and in its heart, it's art. But when you mix the business side of it, and you've got people who have financial stakes in things, they obviously want things that are going to sell, which is not, it's understandable. It's certainly not
absolutely
a bad thing.
I mean, totally respect it.
So how do you, as an artist, kind of balance those two things that kind of need to work in harmony?
It's a really tough balance, especially for me. Like, my nature is not to be an aggressive personality. It's not to be somebody who's going to go out and like make relationships and be like, put myself in situations that are going to be like undeniable towards people. I can be that. Like, my music has always been like, you have to listen to it a few times before you actually really enjoy it. I feel like that's what people have always told us, and it's really tough to find that balance and to cut your emotional ties to it and be like, okay, what's going to be the best thing that's going to help our career and make this label or whoever wants to keep investing in us. And I wish I had a great answer for that, other than to, the thing that I do now is trying to separate myself from it and just say, okay, what's my ultimate goal here? Is it to create a work of art, or is it to be able to keep creating? And I think if I can separate myself and say, I want to keep writing, I don't just want to write this one thing, then it allows me to meet in the middle a little bit more and make the sacrifices or make certain calls to, realize that there's a future, if not just right now. And I think that helps me with a lot of things because it allows me to not sit there and dwell on it and not be like, oh, well, this is, and get tangled up in the idea of something being artistic. It's like, it allows me to make something that's more like, just in the moment and then walking away from that moment and moving on to the next moment and realizing that I want to be able to keep making moments,
Sure.
So,
Well, I think
yeah.
there's no shame in being a band with a cult fan base. It's not one of these extremist things where you're either Katy Perry or you're nobody. There's a lot
Right.
of bands that build their legacy on never being a band that goes to radio, but they've got a cult fan base that really loves everything they do, and they're going to buy every record and they're going to come to every show. So that's
Absolutely.
that's always something to strive for.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering now, given that you've done some production work and you just did a great record by Dan from the Wonder Years, his side project, Aaron West and the Roaring Twenties, which is a concept record kind of character study thing. Having gone through what you did making The Mother, The Mechanic, and The Path, did that process allow you to bring any kind of insight to working on Dan's project?
I definitely think, so because, I've always been a huge fan of those types of albums and things being consistent. And honestly, when he came, he had everything so well written that, like, I focused a lot on music. I focused a lot on making the sound bring out, certain emotions in the story that he was telling. And, it really was a very easy process. It was really, really cool. It was a great experience. And, he was extremely prepared with everything. And, like, he's the type of writer where he's, like, an excellent lyricist. So he, like, really did his homework in making that story feel real and come to life. So, it was very cool, very cool. And I feel like I definitely helped with the whole sonic side of bringing, more emotion out of his story, and it worked really well, I think.
That song that you guys did together, "Divorce in the American South," at the end where the horns come in, is just oh my god, it's one of those moments where you just want to hear it over and over and over again, but you want to listen to the rest of the songs first. It's just that record is just so great. So I commend you on
Awesome.
on making such a great record with him. I think it's truly one of the best things of the year.
Awesome. That's so great, dude.
So then the early November goes away for a while.
Yeah.
And you come back in, I think it's 2012 was when you put out In Currents.
Right.
And we talked a little bit for your AP feature on just some of the stuff surrounding getting back together, but you went off in the interim and did I Can Make a Mess, and you did Ace Enders and a million other people, different people. I never get the name right.
Yeah, a million different people.
So how did having those experiences, did you think you grew as a songwriter by the time you were ready to come back
Absolutely.
and do Early November?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, all those experiences were priceless. I had a lot of awesome and weird things. Like, after I did, after the November stop, like, I was introduced to co-writing for the first time. And, writing with other people, which is something that I had never done nor really known much about. And, that taught me a lot about songs and how they move, and, like, how important breathing is in a song. And I feel like that, invaluable. And also, when I went to do my first solo record, the whole process of that was just insane because I did an entire record. I wasn't even allowed to barely play on it or sing harmonies for that matter, and it was done like in like a huge like studios in LA. And, it was very overwhelming, and the album will never come out. It was shelved because I'm very unhappy with it. And but it taught me a ton about, the music business and writing in general, and like how important personality is on an album, and it definitely set me up perfect for when we were ready to go again. I had a lot of experiences like that. So
wait a minute, you weren't allowed to sing harmonies on your own record?
no, I wasn't. I mean, it was like that album that I tried to do was very it was, when we went into it being like, with label and management, being like, okay, let's take the next step and let's try and further your career and like try and, make it into a different world, because I mean, I had been around for a long time at that point. And, I sort of, where I was in my life, I was like, okay, I don't know if I feel right doing an album like that, but, everybody sort of felt really game about it, and which got me really excited because I'm like, okay, I'll bring my personality to this type of world, and that could be a really cool thing for me. And day one, when I showed up at the studio, like I did pre-production with this producer, and we clicked great. And it was like I had this whole vision in my head of how it was going to go. And the first day I got to the studio, like I went in with the impression that I was going to be playing, most everything minus the drums. And there was a whole entire band that he had hand selected there already just sitting in the room, and I walked in and it was overwhelming because the cast was huge. Like the people were all very professional who play on hit records, and it was pretty crazy. The band was there for like a day. I played my songs one time for them, and they're the type of people who they hear it one time and okay, good, we're ready to record it. And they we're like an all-star band, and they recorded all of the music in like 2 days, learned it and recorded it in 2 days, and then for the rest of the month, like we were doing edits and little overdub things, and then I sang, and then they brought in somebody else to do harmonies because they thought it would be better if somebody else did, and I shouldn't do them. And so I just left at that point, and then we mixed the album, and it was just like it didn't feel right. So, it definitely taught me a lot about songwriting because that whole experience was, I'd let other people do, mess as much as they wanted with what I was doing, and thinking like I was going into it like I just came off the triple disc, so I'm like, instead of being hard-headed, instead of like doing something that's going to be like this, thing where I take extremely seriously and do something weird, I'm going to allow other influences. So I'm not hard-headed. I'm opening up, sort of thing. And I was trying to do that in my life, like not be a control freak. So the record got done, and when it came to the mix being done, Drive Thru was like, I don't know how we feel about this. They were really into it while we were doing it, but then after it was done, they were like, I don't know how we feel about this. And everybody we showed it to was like, there's things that can be cool, but it's pretty, just okay. And, so the record got shelved, and we decided to re-record it when I had to pay for it myself. And I redid the album with Chris Badami.
Who was producing the first attempt?
Oh, it was a guy named Mark Weinberg. I'm not going to say anything bad about him, of course. Like, he is an awesome dude, and he did a really great job with the album he did before that, which was the Matt Nathanson album that blew up. And I think the next album that he did, so I was like very excited because I was going into it thinking like it would be more like Matt Nathanson, but with the underground pop, emo, whatever you want to call it, roots that I came from. And, it came out sort of like a jumbled mess. And, what are you going to do? That stuff happens and you learn from it. And I think, Mark he's a great writer. He's a great guy. And I can't hate on him at all for it. Like, he was doing his job. And, unfortunately, that time did not come out how we wanted it to. But, he's the label did lose a lot of money on it, and so did I, and a year of my life and whatnot, but that's just what happened.
Yeah. The important thing is you learn from it.
Absolutely.
So you
Learned
do
a lot of valuable lessons.
So you do these other things, you do the other projects, and then you come back to the early November. Is there a part of your brain that you just have to flip on then when you're trying to write early November songs versus mess songs or everything else?
No, they all start the same exact way. Like, believe it or not, like, everybody always asks that, but every song for me starts the same exact way. It's just really depressing sounding acoustic guitar. And then I just mold it into whatever it has to be. Like, even if I'm writing, like, if I'm, like, doing a submission for, like, a pop artist, like, it starts as a really sad-sounding acoustic song, and then by the time it's done, it sounds like whatever it needs to sound like. So that's usually where I start everything.
Okay. Do you do a lot of submissions for pop artists and stuff like that these days?
Yes, I do. That's, like, that's the majority of my time.
Okay, cool. I had no clue.
Yep.
Is there something that's like challenging about that you find really, really exciting?
No, yes, I mean, it's all very exciting, but the thing I love about it is just being a different character.
Yeah.
Like, not being I write it all from a very real place, and, to be able to say things that I wouldn't feel comfortable saying in my music, like, I can say it in a different way, and a lot of times, it feels like a much freer, fun experience because I'm not, like, putting that weight on it. And it's pretty cool. It's great.
Well, who knows? Maybe on the next early November record, there'll be a song about clubbing and turning down or whatever.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of clubbing that we're going to be doing.
Is that the kind of stuff you write, or do you still try to, like, keep it, like, fairly not lowest common denominator lyrically?
No, I would never write something about, like, let's just party and get crazy. I wouldn't do that. I still believe that a good message has to be in a song. Whether it's a pop song or whatever it is, it can still be something that's valuable to someone's life,
Yeah. All right, so you get back in the room with these guys and you're working on the songs for Incurrence. What was the first song that kind of was the starting point for this?
I think Tell Me Why was the very first song that was written for it. And that was like one of those things like where it started with acoustic guitar. I made a demo of it. I showed everybody a demo. They were into it, and that was it. Then we made the song. It was a like really quick process actually.
But then you've also got stuff like A Stain on the Carpet, which is this very slow builder.
Right.
Which I think is just kind of classic early November.
Absolutely.
So how do you, I don't know, maybe it's just a feel thing. So if they all start the same way, how do you get to the point where they end up sounding so different? That's kind of a stupid question, I guess, but.
No, totally. It's not at all. I think I just, what I learned, is just like that personality is the push and pull, the how valuable dynamics are. So I'll try, like, if I write, a song, 2 songs in the same key, like, I'll probably end up, purposely changing one to make the song sound different and, dressing it up a little bit different so it has that same emotional feel, but is a very sonically sounding different song.
That makes sense.
But, I try and go, I'm a huge believer in tension and push and pull, and I try and incorporate as much of that as possible in a song, but then in an album as well. So, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, for sure. It's got to ebb and flow. It can't just be
right.
six tracks that are going to hit you in the face all in a row.
Right.
So with the
although that would be awesome.
just to do like a 6-track EP where everything is just a banger.
Yeah.
So now that you're a producer and you do a lot of writing with other people, I've always been curious as to how you balance the way that you write with wanting to stay authentic to the musician that you're working with's voice.
Right.
And their style and the way that they write songs.
Yeah. Sometimes it works out great, and sometimes it's not a good fit at all. like as a writer, like if you're very like a humble, quiet writer, like the session is probably not going to be something very productive because you're going to allow the other person to take control. It really, your personalities have to sort of match up in that scenario, and like you have to, like I'm a very, I hate to say the word like aggressive, but when I write, I'm very passionate about art. So like if somebody else has that same type of energy, we'll push each other and make something really cool. And if somebody else has a completely different personality and they just let me take control, then it's going to end up sounding like, my song probably. But, so sometimes it doesn't work out, but that's why you do it, is to get that type of, I don't want to say competitiveness, but like it's, when you write a song and you sing on that track, like you almost have to have that in rock music anyway, or pop music. You want to hear that tension. You want to hear that, you want to believe that that person has a little bit of that. And a lot of that process happens in that writing session when you are initially writing like the parts and you're almost competing with the other writer, like, and pushing off of them and being like, that I think is put into the track at that time. And it's a very important, process to have that mentality and that picture painted, for sure.
Sure. The thing I really love is when you've got a musician who's also a songwriter and who writes for other people, somebody like Butch Walker. I think I'm a huge admirer of everything Butch Walker does, but right. I love hearing the songs that he writes with other people and find the little stylistic things that he does in his own music that kind of give it that little, just a little fingerprint that that it's Butch Walker. You hear it all over, like the Fall Out Boy, My Songs Know What You Did in the Dark. Some of the phrasing on the verses is similar to something he did, like, God, it must be 12 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
So it's just trying to put your own little stamp on it and make it your own, while also pushing somebody else to something that they normally probably wouldn't have gotten by themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's cool that you get to wear those two different hats. Yeah,
I enjoy it very much.
And you also wear a third hat as a dad.
That's right. I mean, that's my first hat. That's right. Absolutely.
So you got all these. Go ahead.
That's one. I'm good.
You've got all these different things. Your days are probably just jam packed. Like, have you found yourself being way more regimented in terms of I've got X amount of time to write now while the kids are, at a play date or sleeping or?
Absolutely. I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I have 2 hours usually to get my day ready to write lyrics, to see what submissions are around, see what I can do. I'll plan out what I can do, then I'll go to the studio. I mean, the kids will wake up around 7. At that point, then I'll hang out for a little bit. I'll go to the studio around 8:30, and then between 8:30 and 10, I'll try and build a track that I'm working on for someone, or finish a track, or mix, or whatever I have to do. 10 o'clock, I usually start a session with a band who's coming in, and then I'll have that until around 8 p.m. At around 8 p.m., I'll go home, eat dinner, and sort of after that, hang out with my wife a little bit and brainstorm, finish up what I was brainstorming at 5 a.m., and then do it all again the next day.
It's like clockwork now.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, your kids must be pretty old now. How old's your son?
He is going to be 5 September.
Okay, wow. Is he has he taken an interest in music?
He loves it. Yeah, he's awesome. We had I did a music day at his school last year, and it was really cool. I brought in a bunch of instruments and like talked to the kids about everything. Like he wore all his tour passes that I've ever given him, and he like had this. I have this little ukulele backpack that like has a ukulele in it, and it's a like a soft case that you can put on your back, and he wore it the whole entire day as a backpack, but with the ukulele in it. It was pretty fun. He's pretty awesome.
Nice.
Very, very excited about music. So, my daughter, she loves it too. She is obsessed with being on stage. So,
I think you're gonna have to just bring them on tour forever now.
Yeah, I think so. Good point.
So what can you tell me about new music? Is there going to be a new early November record sometime soon?
Yeah, I think, I'm not exactly sure when, but, we're slowly working on it and trying to figure out what it actually is. And, I think we'll figure that out soon. And, I'm, like I said, have no timeline at the moment, probably sometime, spring or something like that. But, yeah, slowly chipping away at it.
Nice.
And figuring out what the next steps are.
I'm sure it's going to be awesome. Why don't you let people know where they can find out more about you and all your projects and all the stuff you've got going on?
Awesome. The Early November Facebook is a fantastic place. I believe it's, I forget what the exact address is, but I'm sure if you just Google Early November Facebook, it'll be awesome. And then all of our Twitters and whatnot, and mine is all whatever, but you can find everything from there. That's the best way to do it.
Just go to Google and type stuff in, right?
Yeah, just type stuff. I mean, what else do you need at this point in life?
Well, there you go, everybody. That is going to wrap it up for this week's show. I would like to thank Ace for coming on and for the talk time. I had a great time speaking with him. If you would like to stay up to date with all that he has going on, you can go to his Twitter page at ace_enders, or go to our website, voiceandversepodcast.com, and click on the show notes page for this week. There will be links to everything Early November, I Can Make a Mess, all the info you need to stay up to date with him. If you would like to stay in touch with the podcast, you can do so at the website or at facebook.com/voiceandversepodcast or Twitter at voiceversepod. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube, and all of those links are on this week's show page. So make sure you go subscribe, tell your friends, and if we would like to hear from you, if you have any musicians, any songwriters that you would like to hear on this show, you'd like to hear the stories behind their songs, drop us a note in any one of those places, and we will do our best to get them on, because I'm sure they have great stories. So go do that. Tell a friend about the show. Leave us a nice review on iTunes or Stitcher or YouTube, and then come back in 2 weeks for another episode of the Voice and Verse podcast when we uncover more of the stories behind your favorite songs. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you soon.